we are excited to welcome back to the show Annabeth Albert. She was last here way back in December 2017 in episode 115, talking about Wheels Up. You have written so much since then. It's so great to have you back to catch up.
Hi, happy to see you.
Now, the most recent thing you've got out is the Frozen Heart series. Tell us a little bit about this series and what its inspiration was.
So I started reading in the late 80s, early 90s romance, and I loved the Alaska set, Debbie McCumbers and Nora Roberts. And so my inspiration for this series would be, what if we went back to that sort of setting, but made it LGBTQ and fun, and that big sweeping feeling, though, of big scenery, big emotions, mountain men. I wanted to capture all that feeling of Alaska and also all the Alaska shows that I like watching, What Man versus Nature, all those sort of shows. And so I thought, let's bring that sort of big scenery to life in a series that also has LGBTQ characters. And so it was really fun for me to get to bring that to life. And it's a 3-book trilogy, and each book stands alone really well because we kind of did it so that there's very little overlap in the storylines for this particular one. With Out of Uniform, they were a little more closely linked. You saw more secondary characters popping back up and forth. And here they stand alone a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Aside from the inspiration itself, did you have any experience with Alaska? Have you ever been there?
That's always the funny part. No, I haven't actually been there. I feel almost guilty admitting that right now. But I have done a ton of research, and I also had Alaska beta readers for each of the books.
Oh, cool.
I had people who actually live in the area in Alaska who are able to give me feedback and, this is wrong, the cost goes over here, but I did a ton of reading books set in Alaska and documentaries and message boards, and then, like I said, using the beta and the sensitivity readers too from Alaska, and so tried to get that feedback.
It's so good to have readers in your readership who can be those beta people when you need them. Yeah, well, and I think that it's really important. In book 2, I have a hero who's Native Alaskan, and so it's really important to me to get a couple of beta readers and sensitivity readers who themselves identified as Native Alaskan, so I could have that perspective come in. And so that's really important to me to find. Sometimes it takes a while to find the right beta reader for that particular project. Like with book 1, we had some alcoholism and some eating disorders being dealt with in that book. And so what I was able to do is get beta readers for that issue. Like I had an eating disorder beta reader, I had an alcoholism beta reader, I had some sensitivity readers kind of about trauma and stuff like that. So I try to really bring in a lot of perspectives so that it's both authentic and it feels true to the character, but also is sensitively done.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree with you about the sensitivity. Because you're dealing with some pretty, heavy, serious subjects, but they're handled in a intelligent and thoughtful way that doesn't make it like preachy or a downer. So I really enjoyed that in the first book. And I wanted to go back to the second book, Arctic Wild, which I really, really loved. Can you talk to us a little bit about the ideas and inspiration behind that particular book? Especially the themes, kind of like, there's like hurt comfort going on. There's kind of May December going on with that particular book. What was the inspiration behind book 2?
So each of the books, I wanted a different fish out of water. So different characters kind of coming. And so I wanted to do a character who was a little bit older, more settled in his life, and confident in who he is. And so I knew he was going to be older. I knew he was going to be a lawyer. I knew he was going to be fairly well off. And I wanted to do a silver fox sort of character, but I call him my silver bear because he's also a little bit of a larger guy. And so I wanted something a little outside the norm for him, kind of. And then I was like, well, so who's he going to get paired with? Well, obviously he's got to get paired with someone who's fun and younger and kind of his opposite in a lot of ways. But I knew that I wanted the hook that kind of bonds them together to be this plane crash. Because I knew all along that book 2 was going to have a plane crash because every book kind of has its own thing. And I knew that book 2's thing was going to be bush pilot, an emergency situation. We've got a crash landing. How are these guys going to deal with it? And who is the most unsuitable guy I can put with the bush pilot in the wilderness having to deal with this emergency? So I did that. And so that was kind of the thing that kind of spurred the book forward from that point. But as I started plotting, I realized that the bulk of the book was going to come after the plane crash. Because at first I was like, maybe I'll do a really tight timeline. I'll get the whole book into a week. And that just wasn't working for these heroes. They really resisted a tight timeline. So I ended up expanding it, and I was like, okay, they're going to have to deal with this aftermath together. And so because they have to deal with it together, they kind of bond in a deeper sort of way, spending the summer together as opposed to just 24 hours in the wilderness. And so to me, that was a real joy to watch them evolve and change. And it's my longest book to date. You can see how thick it is. It's really, it's a monster. But part of why it's so big is kind of the scope of it. I was able to bring in the secondary characters, the one, Reuben's daughter, and then Toby's sister and father. And I have a lot of secondary characters happening in this one. And it was just really fun for me to take that initial idea, there's going to be a plane crash with these opposite attract guys, and they're going to have to deal with it, to this more sweeping sort of story where it does become, like you said, a hurt comfort story. How do we cope with the aftermath and the changes that it brought within each of us? And so I think that's kind of what I think the book ends up doing.
You mentioned the Native Alaskan aspect in book 2. And before we hit record, you mentioned that book 2 is also the most research heavy of these. What was some of what went in here, and what kind of research did you do to get it all to work out right? Because I imagine bush pilot, plane crashes, there's research to do there too.
Yeah, each element, like each sort of, and a lot of times what I do is I work in Scrivener, and in Scrivener I'll have notes for each chapter, and in a short story, like I might have like a line or two of notes per scene. In something like this, I'll have a long list, and it'll have the research questions for each chapter that's going to come up. Like, okay, I need to know how a pilot would handle this sort of altitude disturbance in his thing, and what would that actually mean? What do the instruments look like? What sort of plane is he flying in? What's the weather like? I have to do a lot of research into that. And for that, I look at message boards. I look at small plane businesses. I look at write-ups of past disasters, news reporting. I look at a lot of stuff to kind of get that one detail. Like I won't just, get one thing. I'll look at a couple of different things to kind of get a couple of perspectives. And the same thing with the Native Alaskan details. Obviously, it's not my own lived experience, and I'm really aware of that. So I had the 2 beta readers who were themselves identifying as Native Alaskan. I did a lot of research with blogs written by people who identify as Native Alaskans, autobiographies. I did a couple of phone interviews. I really tried to get a variety of experiences so that I could bring Toby to life in a way that was both sensitive and well-rounded, and that reflected a variety of sort of different opinions in different ways that sort of their lives end up unfolding. And so I'm very proud of the amount of research that went into both Toby and the book as a whole. Because like you said, the bush pilot, the plane crash, even I had a floor plan at one point of their rental house. I had a floor plan drawn on my office wall of exactly what this rental house would look like, where it's located, what the driveway, all this stuff. Like I really go into the minutia.
I like that attention to detail because, as you said, it just brings everything more to life as it goes.
Yeah.
Now, you did mention it was a trilogy, and September it wraps up with Arctic Heat. What's coming in that book, and can you give us a little sneak peek?
So I am so excited for this one. I love the whole trilogy. Each book was its own sort of joy to write. But Arctic Heat is the one that I was probably most excited about. It's a close proximity. We have a ranger who's handed this volunteer who's going to be snowed in with for the season. And this does happen, actually. In Alaska, there are volunteer positions where you can basically go and stay in the state park over winter. And so you're able to basically experience an Alaskan winter with a ranger, and it's kind of cool. So I was like, yeah, when I heard about this, I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be a romance. And so the one hero who comes from California, he's kind of a free spirit, and he has no idea what he's in for, even though he's been around snow a little bit, but he has no idea what he's in for. And then we have the older cranky ranger who also is like, he's lost his longtime partner. She's gone on to be back in the city, and he's really kind of cranky about this. And he's been handed this guy, and so they're going to spend the winter snowed in together, and along the way, they're going to catch some feelings, and it's going to be really fun. And so they meet each other at training, and they're really not sure about each other. But so we have Quill, who's the ranger, and Owen, who's the younger guy from California. And Owen has a feeling about Quill kind of from the beginning, and he's got his number. And so they end up going out to dinner. And at this point, Quill doesn't know yet that they're going to be snowed in together all winter. So Quill's kind of in the dark about that. But Owen is sure about kind of, he likes Quill, and he likes Quill a lot. And so I was going to give you guys, now if you read Arctic Wild, in the back of Arctic Wild, there's the first scene for this one, for Arctic Heat. So I didn't want to read to you from that scene, because if you read Arctic Wild, you've seen it. So I'm going to give you a little snippet of their first kiss, and it just kind of shows their dynamic, I think. It's just a couple of paragraphs, and I'm just going to read it to you. And I'm not as good as my narrators. I have awesome narrators, but we're just going to see. So they're leaving a restaurant here. They each paid their share and then headed outside. The light had started to fade, the midnight sun of the summer long past, the crisp bite to the air making Owen wish he'd grabbed more than his hoodie. Cold? Quill asked as Owen rubbed his arms. A little, yeah. Warm me up, please. I know a shortcut through the alleyways back to the hotel. Lead on. Owen followed him as he ducked down the narrow alley, both of them walking too fast for much conversation. Whoa! Quill's arm shot out, holding Owen back as an SUV unexpectedly backed into the alley. Yanking Owen into a dark doorway with him, Quill frowned at the vehicle, which took its sweet time vacating the alley. Long enough for Owen to sense Quill's warmth and nearness, more of that classic intoxicating scent, the harshness of their breathing that much sexier in the close quarters. The charged air around them was made worse with every brush of their arms. You sure there's nothing on your bucket list? As the SUV finally moved on, Owen turned to block Quill from an easy exit. Nothing I could help with? Not sure. Quill hissed out a breath, which was decidedly not a resounding no, so Owen moved closer. I'm very open-minded and discreet. You could tell me. You're something else, Quill whispered, but his tone was more awestruck than censuring. So I've been told. Taking a chance, Owen put a hand on his shoulder and was relieved when Quill didn't immediately flinch away or tell him off. Come on, take a chance. Nothing you're curious about? Like what? Owen's voice was a harsh whisper. Owen pretended to think as he leaned in close enough to brush his lips against Quill's neck. Quill was taller, but not by so much that Owen had to overly stretch. His skin tasted good, warm, ever so slightly salty. This, maybe? He moved to flit Quill's earlobe with his tongue. Or this? So many delicious possibilities. And that's the look at kind of what's happening between them when they get started, and you'll have to see the rest. But I loved writing Owen and Quill. They were so much fun. It takes place over a couple of months, so we get to kind of see their progression. It's a little bit of a slow burn. Each of the books in the series has been a little more slow burn, but once they get going, there's a lot of heat. And so it was a really fun one for me, and I really enjoyed kind of, whereas Arctic Wild had the bigger cast of characters, this is mainly the two of them dealing with the elements of nature, dealing with each other, dealing with roommate issues. It's kind of the odd couple in Alaska. And so it was just a lot of fun. I can't wait for you guys to get to see this in September.
Have you pre-ordered this yet? Because that forced proximity is so your jam.
I have enjoyed each of the books up to this point, but book 3, that's pretty much everything that I'm looking for in a romance. I mean, longtime listeners know forced proximity is my absolute most favorite thing ever. So yes, that reading you just did, it's like, woo, I can't wait.
Is this, I think you mentioned that this is a real thing people can do to opt to go snow in with a ranger?
They can, so there's volunteer positions all year long with the Alaska state parks and with the national parks too. Those are a little more competitive. But you can go for the summer, you can go for the winter, and they have like little yurts or tiny cabins, pretty rustic conditions, but they're looking for volunteers to basically help the paid rangers out, because without the volunteers, they couldn't get nearly as much done as they can. So basically you become a winter caretaker or a summer caretaker at one of these parks, and you get to help the ranger, but you also get to spend winter in Alaska with all the snow and a tiny yurt and so stuff like that. And each of the sites has its own housing situation. And so that was some of the research I had to do, was figure out what would the housing situation be like at this particular site as opposed to other sites. How are they going to get their heat? How are they going to get electric? Do they have access to the internet? All those little questions come up.
That's fascinating. Would you ever consider doing such a thing?
I have small kids, and so sometimes it seems really appealing, like, oh, I could go for 3 months. And other times it's like, no, they'd miss me, and I'd miss them, and the dog would pine.
Research trip.
I was going to say my next series is back to Oregon. We're going to be back in Oregon, but we're going to be in Central Oregon. And so we are actually taking a research trip as a family. Towards later in the summer, we're doing a research trip to go into Central Oregon to see some of the places that'll be in that series. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, cool. Not quite the same as Snow in a Yurt, but, research trip nonetheless.
Well, I get to bring the kids on that one, so it'll be fun.
They might enjoy Snow in a Yurt. I don't know.
They would, yeah.
You've had a prolific year, even before the Frozen Hearts book started coming out. You had new stuff in Rainbow Cove and Out of Uniform. Are there challenges working across so many series that are so close together in release terms?
So what I tend to do is I tend to write in blocks. So all 3 Alaska books were written back to back to back. But in between 2 of them, I took a little tiny Rainbow Cove break. I gave myself 5 days to write a novella. I was like, okay, I'm kind of burnt on Alaska, just a little. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to give myself 5 days because I'm supposed to be writing these books back to back, and I'm going to write a Rainbow Cove novella. And I did. I wrote 20K in 5 days, wow. And that became Lumberjacked. And obviously editing it and stuff took more than the 5 days. But I got the basic draft down, and then I worked on the edits for that while I went on to Alaska 3. And so that's how I worked a Rainbow Cove in, because it's not a full length, it's a novella. And then the Out of Uniform, that wrapped, I actually wrote that last April. So I wrote it April 2018. Then I started Alaska after that, but then it didn't come out till January because that's how publisher schedules work. Yeah. And so I wrote it as part of Camp NaNoWriMo 2018. It was really fun. Loved writing Rough Terrain. And so it coming out in January was just a joy. But that kind of wrapped up a period of finishing up Out of Uniform and then moving into the Alaska universe. And so I kind of go from universe to universe. I try not to hop back and forth anymore because I've done that in the past, and I end up having to reread a lot of my stuff a lot more when I'm going back and forth between series. And so I think the biggest challenge for me has been working in time for Rainbow Cove, because that one doesn't have publisher deadlines. And so I tend to be overly optimistic with my publisher deadlines, and I'm like, oh, I'll get this book done early and then I'll get another Rainbow Cove in. And lately that has not been happening. The books have been going long and complicated, and I love that. I love writing long. I love writing complex books, but it has made it a challenge in terms of working more Rainbow Cove in.
Mm-hmm. What is going on in Lumberjacked that people who are doing Rainbow Cove might want to check out?
So that one, like Rainbow Cove, is set on the Oregon coast, and all the books are. So it has a honest-to-goodness lumberjack as the hero. He makes a brief appearance in book 2, but this stands alone. If you haven't read book 2, you're fine. And it's just 99 cents, and it's also in KU. It's a fun little, it's under 30K, because I ended up adding a little bonus epilogue to it. But so it has a lumberjack who is an amateur photographer on the side. He likes to take bondage pictures. And so shibari pictures, like there's some really neat artwork done with shibari. And so he meets this makeup vlogger, and the makeup vlogger is like, maybe I would like to pose for one of these pictures. And so their courtship kind of unfurls from there with photos and lumberjack plaid, and it's a lot of fun. And but I really liked the chance to write my makeup vlogger hero, because there's been so many amazing male makeup vloggers recently, becoming even the face of some major brands and stuff. And so I wanted to show that sort of side of masculinity as well. These guys have embraced more of the makeup loving, glitter loving sides of themselves. And so I wanted to do a hero on that sort of spectrum. And so that was really fun for me to get to do him and contrast him with our big, burly, older lumberjack guy. And so it's fun.
That's cool. And for Out of Uniform, is Rough Terrain the end of the line for that series?
Well, I never say never, and I do have more military in Alaska. One of my guys is a former Air Force pilot, and then I'm in the Heart to Heart charity anthology coming up this fall, and I'll have a Marine in that one. So I haven't left military romance completely, but I think Rough Terrain kind of brought Out of Uniform full circle in a lot of ways. It felt like book 7, a natural sort of stopping point for this part of the series right now, but I'm not ruling out more seals in the future. We'll just have to see what the future brings. There's a lot of things I want to explore and a lot of series I want to do, and so we'll just have to see. But I think fans that like the Out of Uniform will really like something that's coming from me in 2020, which is going to be Smoke Jumpers. So we've got the band of brothers again, but they're firefighters, and they're in Central Oregon. Like I said, they're in Central Oregon fighting forest fires, and it's going to be really the research. I'm looking forward to the research, and I'm really looking forward to being back with a band of brothers kind of group of friend heroes, and it should be really interesting and fun.
Is that some of the research you're doing on the Oregon trip this time?
Yeah, so we'll be actually going to some Oregon fire stations. We'll look at both the little towns that they live in. We'll also go to some of the state forest areas there, see some actual forest damage and stuff. I've got some different things planned for us to kind of I want to really get my 5 senses into that area, because I live in Oregon, obviously, but I live more in the valley. And so going more into that Central Oregon terrain, it is way different. Like you said, it's way different terrain. And so I want to really immerse myself in that to really get that flavor for readers.
Mm-hmm. That's very exciting. You've hinted at some stuff in the future, like with the Smoke Jumpers. Of course, Arctic Heat comes out in the fall. Anything else you can tease out in the universe for us of what's coming up?
So I do have a book coming. So the Smoke Jumpers will be coming summer 2020. And in between Arctic Heat and the Smoke Jumpers, I have my first book with Source Books coming. And it is a YA-NA crossover, little bit lower heat, but a lot of the same fun and energy that a YA-NA you'd expect from a YA-NA crossover. I think fans who have liked some of the lower heat ones that have been rising up the charts, like Royal Red, White, and Royal Blue, that sort of book, I think they might like this sort of tone. And it's a road trip romance, which I love road trips. Like I just said, I love road trips. And so I'm really excited. The road trip romance with gamer guys. They're in college and they're going to a big gaming convention. Like imagine Comic-Con, but it's for a card game that they both play, like Magic the Gathering, but I kind of invented a fake card game for them. So they're like these gamer guys who have to make the convention on time to get their chance in the big tournament, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I don't think they've gone public with the title yet, but it is coming in April 2020, and so I can't wait to see the cover they're doing, and it's going to be really fun. It's going to be in bookstores, which is I'm really excited about. So it's going to be in trade paperback.
Yeah, we were excited to see, I believe it was the first of the Frozen Heart series that we found in our local Barnes & Noble.
I know! I'm so stoked. Readers keep tagging me in pictures in the wild of these books, and it makes me so happy. And readers, if you see the books in the wild, take a picture for me. I do love seeing them. And if you like your local bookstore carrying more LGBTQ fiction, let the bookstore know, even if you're not buying a book that day. Say, hey, I'd like to see more fiction like this, not just mine, but a lot of other authors that are coming into mass market and stuff. The more appetite there is for that, I think the more we'll see that in bookstores and stuff and airport kiosks and stuff. And so I'm excited for that.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. And it feels like Red, White, and Royal Blue may lead some of that too. I know that's not a mass market book, but the fact that they're getting picked up in Target is pretty exciting. So definitely ask for those books.
Yeah, I think the more you see that, and Source Books has a lot sort of planned around the release of this road trip romance that should take it to a broader audience. So I'm really excited to see some of what they've got planned and coming. And so it's been really fun to work on that. And that may end up being a series. We just have to see.
Cool. I'm thinking on your backlist, is this kind of a first for YA for you?
Well, they're college age. And so I've done college age with a high heat level in Winning Bracket. And then I did college age with a lower heat level in one of my freebies, First in Line, which is set in the same universe as Winning Bracket. And so that's a sweeter one. It just has a kiss. The one that I'm talking about is somewhere in between there. There are some love scenes. They're just not quite as graphic. And so it was kind of fun to go back to the college universe and I love that age of hero, and I really enjoyed kind of being in that universe with them in that age for a little bit, and so that was fun. But it's not like YA is typically considered senior in high school and older, so that's why they're calling this kind of a crossover, because they are in college, but upper YA readers will probably enjoy this.
Cool. Awesome. I'm excited for that one.
Yeah, that sounds really
I love YA new adult so much.
Well,
what's the best way for everyone to keep up with you online?
So I'm on Facebook. I have Annabeth's Angels as our Facebook reader group. I welcome everyone into there, whether you've read me or not. If you want to talk about fun books, we welcome people in there. I'm also on Facebook myself. I welcome people to follow me on Facebook. I'm on Twitter and Instagram, a little bit less than Facebook. Facebook's kind of my big addiction, but I am on Instagram and Twitter. And I also do playlists for all of my books on Spotify. So if you're on Spotify, you can follow me on Spotify and see kind of the music that's influencing the different books.
Fantastic. We will link up to all that stuff in the show notes for sure. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We wish you the best of luck with everything you've got coming out later this year and into 2020.
Thank you.